Good morning. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and thank you for inviting me. I could be today on a terrace in Paris because it's a blank day, having a nice coffee, a croissant, and enjoying this nice spring day. Anyway, so thank you very much. It's sunny here too, but I love insurance and I love reinsurance, and that's why it's a pleasure to address the issue today of, I like to fly. By the way, a reinsurer spends his time flying around. We fly around the globe. I surf the world, from New Zealand to Canada and from Peru to Japan. And so I spend my time in a plane, and I'm very attentive to everything that, slows you down in a plane or pushes you up or, puts you off track. And so my talk this morning, I try to apply, what I know about flying to the insurance and reinsurance industry. And the insurance industry and reinsurance industry, by the way, needs to adapt its dynamic to various constraints. You have headwinds slow you down. You have to consume more fuel, more capital if you have headwinds. You have really those nice tailwinds, so you speed up, less fuel, and most of the time you gain time and you fly and you arrive early. But you have also those crosswinds. And those crosswinds pushes you off track, so one way or the other. And of course you have ascending winds. In the industry they are quite rare, to tell you the truth. And you have those shocks, lightning, storms, that certainly characterize the industry. So I'm going to start by the headwinds. Headwinds are important for me. Those are the challenges, slowing down the industry as a whole in the world, in Europe of course, but also in the US or in Asia. And they've been here, those headwinds, for quite a time now. I mean, you have to consume more fuel. So everything being equal, more capital for the same level of risk bearing. So I'm going to go quickly through some of those headwinds. The first one, of course, is the macroeconomic uncertainties for the last 8 to 9 years, since 2007, 2008. It's true that the global economy has slowed down, everything being equal, when you compare the last 10 years to the previous 10 years. Some industries have suffered a lot, energy, for instance, to mining, commodities, oil and gas, just to mention some of them. But also, when you look globally, investments by households, investments by corporations have slowed down. So when you accumulate less, you insure less at the end of the day. Certainly, troubled economic situation also pushed lots of companies to cut down costs. And one way to do it to buy less insurance, and therefore to be eventually uninsured. So yes, some years show a very strong, abnormal slowdown of the GDP. And here we did some computations to show that there is a co-integration between P&C premiums and GDP. We don't know what the causality, more premiums, more GDP, or more GDP, more premiums. Let's call that co-integration for those liking to do econometrics. But certainly the combination of those factors throughout the last 10 years has resulted in a subdued insurance and reinsurance demand. And it's true that the industry has not fared as well as before. We don't know what's going to happen. There is a big debate for now 2 or 3 years. The famous hypothesis of what we call long-term secular stagnation. The hypothesis has been put forward by Larry Summers. What do we call secular stagnation? It's low growth, low inflation, low interest rates, low productivity gains. And this, of course, goes again and again and again for quite a few years. We enter this secular stagnation world. For us, if my first hypothesis is true, it means that the insurance industry would have a very let's say, gloomy future, just because no growth means less insurance demand, and less reinsurance demand, everything being equal. It seems strange. You were opening any kind of economic newspaper 2 years ago, secular stagnation was really the main hypothesis, and there is lots of debate about is it true, is it a true hypothesis or not. Today it starts to disappear. It's true that Europe starts a recovery. It's true that the US now is for a few years going back to a growth track. It's true that Japan, after many years of stagnation, starts also to show some signs of, I would say, recovery. So, but be careful, when you talk about an hypothesis of long-term secular stagnation, you can have sometimes, some nice period, and we will go back to the secular stagnation of low productivity gains. So, for me, it's important to talk about that, because when you make strategic decision to invest, you have to have a view of the next, not 5 years, 10 years, maybe 15 years, to know you are going to allocate your capital. As far as I'm concerned, I still keep the secular stagnation as an hypothesis, and I check really each quarter that this hypothesis is not verified. But if anything happens, certainly I will have to, for instance, slow down the accumulation of capital in my company. Second headwind is very well known, very low interest rates, which, by the way, is correlated with the first headwind of slow growth. Even if interest rates have increased a little bit recently, they still remain extremely low, especially in Europe. And that's what we call in economics financial repression. And in order to cope with the economic slowdown and the financial crisis, as you know, we put in place those quantitative easing policies. It has been true for all central banks in the world, from UK to the US and, of course, to the European Central Bank. So we're going to pay the cost of this policy for many years. It has affected the bottom line. It has affected the financial contribution of the assets on the asset side of the balance sheet to the bottom line of the companies. And even so, if interest rates increase today, we're going to pay the cost for quite a few years, because we have a stock of very low yield instruments that we've been accumulating over the last 10 years. And so it will take years to mature. So even so, we have today, it seems, signs of an increase of interest rates, more in the US than in Europe, of course. It will take time before we really see that in the financials. The question is, how do we step out of quantitative easing? That's a question, secular stagnation. Second question, will central banks be able to master the exit of the quantitative easing policies that have been leading for years and years and years? So we have two hypotheses here. Maybe central banks would be able to carry a well-managed, well-controlled, with inflation and rates progressively renormalizing through small and paced incremental increases. So that's a nice way out of today's monetary policy. Would be really for the Fed and the ECB to be able to, gradually, progressively increase the rates, avoid a return of inflation, of course, and not destabilize the financial markets. Now, it can be also chaotic. It can also be chaotic. In other words, we could have a quicker than anticipated, higher than anticipated increase in inflation that would lead central banks again to increase rates in order to avoid inflation to start to accelerate. And here it would again affect the industries. We will have unrealized capital gains on the balance sheet. We have a huge bond portfolio. And so we see signs of return of inflation here and there. I'm extremely attentive as far as I'm concerned, because for insurers and reinsurers, return of inflation has always been costly in the past. You don't fully integrate inflation in the way you price the business. You're always caught by surprise, especially accelerating inflation. That was the case in the past, and therefore we have to be extremely attentive to the way central banks will be able to pursue exit strategies from quantitative easing. and which is remarkable to show. Those are the balance sheets of the central banks, as you know, the Fed and the ECB, and recently the ECB balance sheet exceeded the Fed. So, by the way, it shows that we are not synchronous between the US and Europe. US traditionally over the last 150 years always ahead of the curve. They already experienced a recovery. We are not yet there in Europe. So let's be attentive to these developments, inflation and rates, because that will be certainly key for the solvency and the profitability of the companies in the years to come. The third, and I was just listening to the end of this panel, is of course about regulation. This is, for me as an economist, former economist, there's a trade-off between stability and growth. Of course, the dream is to have both, perfect stability, perfect growth, balanced growth, that's a dream, but it seems that this is not the case. You have a kind of trade-off, and if you insist on stability, it means that you're going to pay a cost in terms of growth. Identically, if you privilege or favor growth and expansion, there will be cycles, there will be ruptures, eventually difficulties, and therefore, the dream is not achievable, and I believe that we have to make a choice. To my point of view, reading around the world lots of developments, there's a growing feeling that the regulatory wind is fading a little bit, certainly true in the US. That's not debatable. The US stated recently that the ICS is insufficiently developed to be applied as a capital standard to the companies it supervises, so that's a kind of announcement of a death. When you read it through the line, the US Congress Financial Service Committee sent a letter to the US Fed chair in January 2017. This letter has been very well publicized, criticizing US participation in international fora. So, yes, it seems that we are, after 8 years or 9 years, at a point where people think about, what's the next step for regulation, and the collective utility function, I believe in that, is seemingly changing with a view that financial regulation might need to be toned down a little bit, that's certainly true in the US, or even put to a halt to favor growth and economic recovery. I put all the G20 communiques on my computer. I like to see the words that, the leaders of the world use when they make a statement. And stability, there were 22 times the word stability in 2008 or 9, if I remember well. Everything needed to be stable. Stabilität, that was the translation's German word. And, so what do you agree upon? Stability. What do you want? Stability. What do you want to achieve? Stability. So everyone was, and so how to achieve stability is to, of course, to multiply, Jerry knows it, regulation to reach stability. And by the way, that's where we created the Forum of Financial Stability. Okay, it was stability. It was not the Forum of Stability and Growth. It was the Forum of Financial Stability. So now the pendulum seems, I didn't say to move backwards. It seems not to have the same momentum than a few years ago. And I put again the G20 communiques on my computer, and the key word now is growth. Growth. Stability disappeared, by the way. But maybe you mention it, at the end of the communique to show that, certainly there is one country saying it's very important to recall that we are all together to try to reach the highest level of stability. But at the end of the day, the consensus today in the world is about let's go back to growth. And therefore capital accumulation and so on and so on. So that's fascinating. I like history because history has cycles. This is true for economics. It's true also for, let's say, thoughts, ideology, whatever. And so the question is really on the table right now. I don't know. It would be a pity, I tell you what I think, to go now full steam ahead, or I should say backwards. I think it would be stupid to say we should go back to where we were 10 years ago. Never. We learned a lot. We have done quite good things in terms of improvement of the policies in order to reach stability, in order to have a more safe and solvent financial system. Therefore, I don't think that we should start a deregulation cycle right now. and to say, okay, let's go back to the good old days. No, good old days were not good, and were not what we achieved, by the way, because we paid a huge cost to cope with the mess of what happened. So, yeah, this would undermine all the efforts and achievements today to make the financial system more sound and safer. So let's not go back to where we were. At the same time, I firmly believe that some reforms or developments would need to be rethought or adjusted in order to ensure focus, relevance, and ultimately effectiveness of the global regulatory oversight. As far as I'm concerned, I think the time is ripe, and by the way, I listened to Jerry Cross' final word. He talked about optimal. I believe the world now will enter what we call optimal regulation, and optimal regulation is not deregulation or re-regulation. It's to be sure that we reshape regulation, we adjust, we fine-tune regulation, so as to be sure that the adverse effects of regulations are removed and the good effects of regulations are maximized. So I call for this will be the era I wish to enter, which will be to reshape, once again, not to go back, but we have learned a lot, improved a lot, we can refine. So the time is ripe for me to refine regulation in such a way, and here the industry has a role, and all the insurers in this room should play a role in saying that we don't understand, that should be certainly reshaped, that should be redesigned so as to have an optimal regulation. If we don't do it, we're going to pay a price for too much a price. The community will pay a price, because slower growth means less well-being by definition as compared to a situation where we could go back on a more resilient, permanent, and stable growth. So let's keep what needs to be preserved, and let's adjust what needs to be amended, and let's fine-tune what needs to be improved. There's a fine line here, but I don't want to go too much. For instance, systemicity in insurance, I think we went too far. That's applied to banks, and I believe it's not applied to insurance companies, certainly not to reinsurance companies. So we have had the debate for 8 years. Let's finish up this debate, and reinsurance is not a systemic point. We have been living through incredible times for the last 150 years, wars, inflation, depression, exchange rate movements, whatever, and by the way, we are still there, so it's a proof, the proof is in the pudding, as you say in Ireland. Anyway, the fourth headwind, refragmentation of the world. Refragmentation of the world, that's new. My generation has always been, for globalization, and let's get rid of frontiers, let's open the customs, and so on and so on. So after 30 years of globalization, and the insurance industry has certainly been, I was already in the industry when we did the third directives, and so I was a proponent of, the development of a market in Europe, insurance market in Europe, and that's what I called was the defragmentation of the world, instead of having 27 regimes to try to have only one solvency regime, for instance. So, but today, everywhere, the 3 Ps apply. Patriotism, bad patriotism, populism, and a kind of protectionism. You see that in many countries, and by the way, I'm French, we had a long debate about, those topics, throughout the last year. Fortunately, we have been able to move back and to have a government which will be certainly oriented in the right direction right now. And so be careful about that. Are we ahead of increasing refragmentation of the financial world, of the economic world in the future? I wish that this is not the case. We have to be extremely attentive again, because you know, be careful when a country starts to apply protectionist measures that spreads around the world. He did it, retaliation, we did it, and we do it, he did it, so we do it. And so it's tough to get people, getting a consensus on, applying the same types of laws and openness. It takes when you look at history, when you go the other way, it's extremely quick, to have borders. Mentioning Brexit, of course, I was happy about, UK being in the EU, as far as I'm concerned. We operate in EU, we operate in UK, and it took, it took one vote to refragment part of Europe and part of the European insurance markets. Everyone is wondering where to settle right now and how we're going to carry business out from the UK. So it goes quickly, and again, we have to be extremely attentive. The last headwind, it's a good headwind for us. It's a good for you. It's a good headwind. So it's not a really good one. Reinsurance prices go down. There's too much capacity in the industry. Look at that. We have almost increased by 70% the capital in the insurance industry over the last 8 years. I thought we were in a crisis. Yes, we're in an economic crisis, and we've been piling capital plus ILS. So the consequence, of course, is the fact that we have seen price decreases when you have too much capital in an industry. I mean, that's basic economics of supply and demand. Increased capital means declining prices. And when you look at the prices, you can see that the increased supply of capital in reinsurance and through the financial market has led to pricing decline and an increased competition from new capital inflows exerting on the price level of reinsurance. It's spectacular. When you look since 1999, you had the effect of the World Trade Center pushing the rates up. Then you had the hurricanes Katrina, Rita, Vilma. Then you had the financial crisis. You had the tsunami the tsunami in Japan in 2011. But altogether, we are very far away from the prices that were in effect 20 years ago. So that's an issue, not for you, because you benefit from low reinsurance rates. It's an issue for reinsurers because we have to carry increasing risks and with prices that don't reflect always the actuarial value of the risk we put on a balance sheet. So look, even the cat bonds, because I like this graph, reinsurance rates are down, but also ILS, those are the price of cat bonds. There's also an excess of cat bond. The financial market provides additional capital, and therefore the price of cat bonds go down. Questions here. Should we expect an increased risk transfer to the capital markets through ILS? Will there be in the future an increasing supply of additional capital from the financial market into the reinsurance industry and therefore to the insurance industry? And by the way, when you look at the latest ILS, you see that they try now to go directly to the insured, not through the insurer. For instance, the Japanese railway has issued a cat bond to cover the risks they face in case of a big quake in Japan. And recently, Credit Suisse issued a cat bond to cat, a bond, to cover their operational risk. So that's new. So every day we see expansion of, by the way, Ireland is very well placed for cat bonds. And myself, we are certainly one of the, I think my company has issued the most cat bonds for the last 20 years, and we issue those cat bonds from Ireland, and I congratulate Ireland to have had the wisdom to pass a legislation. UK is only considering passing a legislation, or doing it right now, the pro-cat bonds, I think. So I like cat bonds. Why? I issue cat bonds. I protect my group through cat bonds, so why should I say it's awful? 50% of the cat bonds issued today in the world are issued by insurers and reinsurers, mostly reinsurers. So for me, it's one way to protect myself. Instead of going to a retrocessionaire, 50% of the protection of my group is done through cat bond. Second, I invest in cat bond. Very nice return, 6%. And we have about 1 billion of euros invested in cat bonds. And third, I structure cat bonds for my clients. So be agnostic. I don't say it's good or bad. When you have a development such a cat bond, what you do, you try to make the most money out of it or the best use of it, either to protect yourself or to protect your clients. So, but we have to be attentive. Capital movements shape always the destiny of an industry. And here we have an influx of capital for quite a while. Therefore, the equilibrium, the balances today are not exactly what I call optimal. We have tailwind. Fortunately, tailwind, I'm going to go extremely quickly. So headwinds are pushing us a little bit backwards. Tailwinds that just propulse us. I love it. The risk universe is expanding. My raw material, your raw material is risks. So imagine that we would work in the oil industry. I mean, one day there will be less oil and less oil and less oil, and maybe if so you are in the oil industry, you just wonder what you're going to do next, you know, if you have no oil. Maybe you can always invest in windmills, what they do, by the way. You know, it's not the same type of industries and oil. So for us as insurer and reinsurer, we have it's fantastic. The risk universe is expanding every day. They provide, they bring us additional raw material every day. That's what I call the expanding risk universe. We have, of course, the natural risk. We have, of course, the technological risk. We have also, unfortunately, the man-made, God-made, and we have also the terrorist-made risk. But unfortunately, the world seems to be characterized by the increasing risk. We have everything. We have everything. Cyber, biohazards, cloning, GMOs, Internet of Things, automation, autonomous cars, impulse solar storms on grids, name it, every day. They bring a new risk to me and saying, you know, could you please bear it? Could you please, you know, take it? So that's fantastic. It's fantastic, but in the meantime, since people don't like risk, you know, it means that the population is certainly a little bit upset by the fact that it seems that the risks are multiplied and that the capacity for modern societies to minimize the universe of risk is not what the population and the community expect. So there are more and more interdependency between the risk. It's a superb graph because you see everything. If you go back, where am I? It's incredible, you know. So the closer you are to the center, it means those risks are already on the table. Okay, so and the larger you are, it's GMOs, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, synthetic biology, and so on. So on. That's coming in the coming years. And the color, when it's red, it's not good, usually, you know, so that's why the color of my company is blue. And when it's yellow, it's acceptable. When it's orange, please watch out. But look at this risk universe. It's incredible. I would have given you the same map 20 years ago. Half of what's on this graph would not have been there. Because we didn't invent that. We were not, technology is progressing, science is progressing, and autonomous machine, microbial resistance. I mean, we use so much antibiotics that they are not efficient again. So we are facing this risk of a global pandemic where we would not have the tools to fight against it. I think I put regulation as a risk on this graph, so don't look at it when you are a regulator. Second tailwind is the crisis of the welfare state. You know, governments are so much into debt that they will not have the capacity to bear additional risk. I said for years, this is true for pensions, that's true for long-term care, that's true for many risks, just because, even healthcare, because they spend too much, and therefore there's too much deficit, there's too much debt, and there is a limit to taxes. So I'm not going to go away. I believe that states are poor risk managers, that I always said it. They have a kind of short-term bias. States are under high economic pressure, and therefore I believe that the insurance industry and the reinsurance industry should really step in to promote solutions in order to alleviate the burden on states and prepare for the future through market mechanism. Maybe through a new partnership between state and the market. Fine for that. I'm always saying, you know, we cannot bear all the risk, and maybe we should find new ways to arrange, let's say, public provision support guarantee with market capacity, innovation and adaptation to the individual needs. That's in front of us. If we find solutions to be able, we have to innovate. If we're able to find solutions, to provide solutions to the people through a new deal with governments or public authorities, this is true in developed countries, it's true in developing countries, it would be absolutely fantastic. So what are the conditions for the insurability to be expanded? which roles should have insurers, reinsurers on the one hand and states, public authorities on the other hand, and how to innovate through new types of public-private partnerships. That's certainly on the table right now, and I hope that we're going to do it. Now we have crosswinds. Crosswinds, you fare well, and the key word for the last 3 years is disruption. I told you I put everything on my computer. By the way, it started with a crisis. Everything that starts by DIS means the subtitle, if you see the translation, means usually shitty, roughly speaking. So distress, this is not really, discontinuity is not really, disruption, this is not, you can go on and go on and go on. So DIS means, it's a rupture, it's something which is, anyway, something which is basically bad. So, and another key word is contestability. So you have to have those two words to understand crosswinds. Disruptions, new technology, new ventures, new schemes, new entities, and so on and so on. But we have also the Uberization is not a disruption, it's a contestability. Contestability is, economic sense of the term, is the situation where new entrant with a different technology or a different production function or with another regulation plays with different rules and incumbents and strengthens a well-established business model. I know what's competition. I compete with the peers. They have the same constraints. So then let the best win. Okay, it's normal, usual competition. Contestability is absolutely different. It's from outside. So we're all competitors are concerned with the new entrant that will try to destabilize the entire industry. So that's a fact. It's Tesla with an electric machine today with a traditional automobile. So I cite the Financial Times. Instruments that put risk onto the capital markets are disrupting an age-old game. Investors move in on reinsurers' turf. That's contestability. ILS contests the reinsurance market today, maybe the insurance market for large risk tomorrow. So that's what I say, that's disruption. But we have, that's contestability. And also disruption, you are not able to adapt. So you start by contestability, you end up by disruption, and therefore we have to be extremely. Today, for insurance, we've been able to cope with the ILS. Be careful, the insurance industry is now bound to be confronted with the disruption with respect to distribution networks. That's where we are right now, distribution. We are protected by regulation, Jerry, because the newcomers don't like to invest a lot of capital. And so Solvency II is one way to slow down the contestability of the insurance and reinsurance market, just because, when you go to Google, you go to the CEO of Google and you tell him, we're going to venture in insurance. Yes, sir, I'm going to stop here. Yeah. No, if I'm not, I can stop here right now and go back, find a terrace and end up my lunch. You go to CEO of Google and you tell him, we need a lot of capital to venture in insurance. Oh, come on. What's the return? 8%. Are you crazy? 8%, you want me to invest a lot of capital in insurance? Forget about it. So this is true for many newcomers, so level of capital is protecting us a little bit, but I'm going to speed up, so here we were. You know everything, so I can skip. Lemonade. It should be, when I say disruption will characterize distribution network, it should have been called Jameson or Bailey's, by the way. But anyway, so this company would have, been created in Ireland. You would never take lemonade. It's the name of a company anyway. So lemonade. They pretend they be able to handle a claim in 3 seconds. And by the way, I checked. It's true, because they have a kind of artificial intelligence machine tool, and where you check immediately if the guy is a liar, did a bizarre claim in the past, was he really on the road at the time, was the road icy, you can check everything, how was the weather like, was it foggy, there were other accidents, so the guy is not lying, you send the check. So I can do it also myself with my own intelligence, but artificial intelligence is just speeding up the way. So what I say, Lemonade could be a disruptor for traditional insurers, having the old claims handling approach, where you have to wait 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and you check, and you send an expert, you check the record. So artificial intelligence will be a big disruptor in the future, because it's all about data mining and data exploring and so on and data. So I believe when I say we're crosswinds, be careful. Those are winds that push the traditional insurers and traditional reinsurers a little bit off track. So we have lots of disruptions, contestability disruptions. As you can see on this graph, it will mainly affect distribution. It will help the pricing. Those tools exist already right now. It will also develop some new products, but basically what we have to expect is distribution being under pressure, traditional distribution networks under pressure. We have to adapt. We have to adapt. That's a key word. We need not to wait time. We have to transform a business model to adapt to the digital revolution, to the new ways to produce insurance and to distribute insurance. And the quicker we go, the less we are going to be attacked by incumbents, by the newcomers. So this is our duty. I don't want to say to the guys, please don't step on my field, on my garden. No, what I say, we should move quickly as an industry to introduce everything in today's organization so as to be able to resist. I want just. We have whirlwinds, we have lightnings, we have shocks. We can face a global pandemic. That's my role. You have the trends. I talked about the trends till now, but aside from the trends, we can have shocks shaking up the industry. A global pandemic is, for me, the largest risk in my balance sheet due to the modern world. I mean, you go to the Mecca, you have 2 million people under the sun. You have a virus spreading around the world in 1 week, and it's a worldwide pandemic. That's possible. Solar storms. We had solar storms in the past. Solar storms today, it's absolutely awful for mobiles, for GPS, for everything which is telecommunication and so on and so on. And a solar storm can last 100 years for those who, so buy some sun cream because, it's 100 years, might be a little long. We can face hyper-terrorism. That for me is a drama, absolute drama. Nuclear, bacteriological, chemicals. I don't want to expand, but this is a picture of Chicago attacked by an anthrax. And of course we have cyber risk. So I'm going to end up with cyber risk. We had a nice attack last week. So we had a nice attack last week. Maybe you don't know the site. Can you launch the video just to finish up? I do it? It's here? So this is true, North, N-O-R-S-E. And you see the attack, the cyber attack. You have the origins, you have the targets, you have the type of attacks. And this is Dr. Strangelove, okay? For those who remember. It's permanent around the globe, from China, Yemen. You see Yemen. Yemen is a big place. That's bad, okay? So that's only 3 seconds of cyber attacks. Now, a massive cyber attack is something which is even worse. So on the 25th December 2015, that was Christmas Day, a massive cyber attack on the US from China. So I do it too? So look, that's a nice one. Look at that. The kids just got their gifts and they were plugging in, and China launched, this is Dr. Strangelove Square, and that's what happened last week, okay, with the new staff, where coordinated attacks. This is the first risk in history, ladies and gentlemen, which is a new space because you cannot localize it. So it's first. Usually we have a plant, you have a cat, you have a flood, always localized. So cyberspace is not territorialized, and therefore we have to change it. Thank you very much. So it will have been too long. We're talking about trends in short term, maybe medium term. In the very, very long term, we have also shocks. For instance, I asked a friend of mine to compute the probability for the Earth to be swallowed by a black hole. I know you want me to be swallowed by a black hole to finish up my stuff. I know you. Yeah, he was making sounds. Stop it. How can you live without knowing the probability of being swallowed by a black hole? So it's in 100 years, okay? It's not Solvency II compliant, it's only 100 years. Only 100 years. Anyone has the idea? So the probability, as a matter of fact, the black hole approaches the solar system and pushes the Earth off the orbit. Okay? Either we freeze or we grill. So you have the choice between dessert and main course. So policies are ready for those who wish to protect. It's 16 zeros and 3. It's not nil, and I hope that I will be invited again before it happens. Thank you very much.